There is a shrub that blooms through the coldest months of the year. November straight through March in many climates, sometimes flowering right through a dusting of snow. And on any afternoon warm enough for your bees to leave the cluster, it hands them exactly the pollen and nectar they need to survive the single hardest stretch of the beekeeping calendar. It is not exotic, it is not hard to grow. It was once a standard planting on old farms and homesteads that kept bees, and almost nobody plants it anymore. Here's the full story. Let me start with why winter forage matters more than most beekeepers give it credit for. Because the assumption that bees simply shut down and wait out the cold is not quite right. A honeybee colony does not hibernate the way many other insects do. Through winter, the colony clusters together for warmth, vibrating their flight muscles to generate heat, and living off stored honey. But on any day warm enough, often somewhere in the mid-40s to 50s Fahrenheit, foragers will leave the cluster and fly, looking for anything blooming nearby. This is not occasional or rare. Beekeepers who have winter forage available report their colonies working it heavily on those rare warm days, hauling in both pollen and nectar in the dead of what should be the quiet season. Here is why that matters so much. The colony's late winter and very early spring buildup depends heavily on protein, meaning pollen, to begin raising the first rounds of brood that will carry the hive into spring. A colony with no pollen source available until the first dandelions and fruit trees bloom is starting that buildup from a nutritional deficit, stretching stored reserves and often falling behind. A colony with access to a genuine winter blooming source gets a running start. Real, fresh pollen coming in during the exact window when the queen is beginning to ramp up laying again, well before the rest of the landscape has woken up. So the gap is real, and it is not small. It runs from whenever fall's last blooms fade until the first true spring flowers open. Often a stretch of 2, 3, sometimes 4 months depending on your climate, where a colony gets nothing at all from the landscape unless something has been deliberately planted to fill it. The shrub that fills that gap better than almost anything else is Mahonia, also called Oregon grape, and it is the plant old-time gardeners and beekeepers relied on before it quietly fell out of fashion. Mahonia is an evergreen shrub, native to western North America, with holly-like leaves and clusters of bright yellow flowers that open anywhere from November through March depending on the variety and your climate. Some cultivars begin flowering as early as January and hold their bloom into March. Others start earlier still, in late fall. Strung together, the different Mahonia varieties can carry a genuine bloom window across almost the entire dead season, and it is remarkably tough. Even in a hard cold snap down toward 5 degrees Fahrenheit, Mahonia's bloom may be damaged but is not destroyed. The shrub simply keeps flowering once temperatures moderate. Some varieties tolerate cold down to -5 degrees and continue blooming with snow on the ground. This is a plant built to keep producing exactly through the stretch when almost nothing else will. Honeybees are documented foraging heavily on Mahonia whenever conditions allow it. Any warm enough day sends foragers straight to it for both pollen and nectar. It has been specifically recommended by extension services and pollinator researchers as one of the small handful of genuinely valuable winter shrubs for exactly this reason. This is not folklore. This is a plant with a real, measurable role in carrying colonies through the hungriest part of the year. Quick word before I go on. Everything I've learned about forage planning, the winter gap, the plants that fill it, and the full season calendar that keeps a colony fed from the last fall bloom to the first spring flower. I gathered it all into the Hive Vault over at daleshive.com. The link's in the description below and on the channel page if you want it. This video's free and always will be. The Vault's just the long version for folks who want the whole thing. I won't mention it again. So why did we stop planting it? The honest answer has more to do with landscaping trends than with the plant itself. Mahonia is not flashy in the way modern ornamental landscaping tends to favor. It does not have the huge, showy blooms of the shrubs that dominate garden centers, and it flowers at a time of year when most people are not thinking about their yard at all, which means it rarely gets chosen by someone shopping for curb appeal in spring, when the majority of ornamental purchases happen. It also has sharp, holly-like foliage, which some gardeners avoid near walkways or play areas without realizing it can simply be sited at the edge of a property instead. Old farmsteads did not plant Mahonia for how it looked in April. They planted it because it did real, unglamorous work in the depths of winter, at the exact time a beekeeper needed his colonies to have something coming in. That kind of utility planting has largely been replaced by decorative choices, and the plant that used to be standard equipment on a working homestead is now something most people have never heard of, let alone planted. There is a second reason it faded from beekeeping knowledge specifically. Winter forage in general gets very little attention in beginner beekeeping education. Almost everything taught to new beekeepers is about the active season, spring buildup, summer flow, fall preparation for winter. The idea of managing forage during winter itself, when most courses tell you there is nothing to do but wait, simply is not part of the curriculum most people learn from. The knowledge did not disappear because it stopped working. It disappeared because nobody was teaching the part of the calendar it belongs to. Here is how to actually use this in your own bee yard. Site Mahonia, where your bees will find it easily and where it gets some winter sun, since bees forage far more readily on a bright, wind-sheltered day than a gray one, and the extra warmth of a sunny microclimate can be the difference between a colony working it and a colony staying clustered. A south-facing spot near the apiary, ideally with some wind protection, gets the most use out of every warm winter window. Plant more than one variety if your climate allows it, because different Mahonia cultivars bloom at slightly different points across the November through March window. Layering a few varieties together extends your coverage rather than concentrating it all into a few weeks. This is the same logic as staggering any forage planting. You are not trying to flood the colony with everything at once, you are trying to make sure something is always available across the entire gap. Pair it with the other genuine winter bloomers if you want to close the gap even further. Witch hazel blooms in a similar window and is documented as a strong late fall and winter source specifically for honeybees, since the colony's ability to fly on any suitably warm day means it can take advantage of forage that most solitary bee species, which do not fly that late in the year, simply ignore. Winter jasmine, heaths, and heathers, and early flowering hazelnut round out a genuine winter forage calendar when planted alongside Mahonia, and be patient. Like most forage shrubs, Mahonia takes a few years to establish and reach a bloom size that meaningfully feeds a colony. This is not a fix for this coming winter. It is an investment in every winter after this one, the same as any tree or shrub planted for the long term. Here are the mistakes that keep people from getting the benefit of this. Mistake 1 is planting it somewhere shaded or wind exposed. Bees forage far less on a cold, dim, blustery day. Give it sun and shelter, and it will be worked far more heavily on the days that matter. Mistake 2 is planting only one variety and getting a short bloom window instead of a long one. Layer varieties, or pair it with witch hazel and other winter bloomers to stretch your coverage across the whole gap rather than a few weeks of it. Mistake 3 is expecting an immediate result. This is a multi-year investment, like any forage shrub. Plant it for the colonies you will have 3 winters from now, not the one you have this year. Mistake 4 is forgetting the sharp foliage when choosing a spot. Site it at the edge of the property or away from foot traffic, rather than fighting with it in a high-traffic area. The plant does not need to be convenient to be valuable. Picture your apiary through a winter with this planted and established. A cold, quiet stretch settles in after the last fall blooms fade. And then a mild afternoon arrives. One of those days that breaks 45 or 50 degrees in the middle of an otherwise gray month. And instead of your colonies having nowhere to go, foragers stream out to a shrub covered in small yellow flowers that has been blooming steadily since November, undamaged by anything short of a hard freeze. They come back with pollen. The queen, sensing that resource, begins to ramp up, laying a little earlier and a little more confidently than she would on stored reserves alone. And by the time the first dandelions finally open in spring, your colony is not starting from a deficit. It has had a running start the whole gap, from something the old farmsteads planted on purpose, and we quietly stopped. Drop a comment and tell me what, if anything, blooms near your hives in winter, and whether you've ever seen bees out foraging on a warm day in January or February. I read every single one at Dale's Hive. And if you want the full winter forage plan, including how to layer it with witch hazel and the other cold season bloomers, it's waiting in the vault at daleshive.com. Link in the description. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because next week we're mapping out the complete year-round forage calendar, so your bees never face an unplanned gap from the first frost to the first thaw. There's a flower that feeds bees all winter, and almost nobody plants it anymore. Now you know which one, and why your colonies have been going without it.